Good evening, everybody. This is Professor Roft. We are continuing with our course in business ethics. Tonight we're going to be talking about consumer protection. And we have to understand a little bit of a backdrop about consumer protection, where we've come from, where we are currently. Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, during the height of the Industrial Revolution, the prevailing attitude was caveat emptor, which was basically buyer beware. What we have today is far from the standards that we had before. Today we have protection from the FDA when it comes to food and drugs. We have government interaction, product recalls. Every time a baby crib hurts somebody, it's taken off the market. The slightest issue you have with a vehicle, it's recalled. Medicines are monitored, and this is something that took many years, many decades to happen. So tonight we're going to talk about consumer protection. We are now going to slide number 2, chapter 15. Key learning objectives: analyzing the reasons for consumer advocacy and the methods consumer organizations use to advance their interests, knowing the 5 major rights of consumers, assessing the ways in which government regulatory agencies protect consumers and what kinds of products are most likely to be regulated, determining how consumer privacy online can best be protected, examining how the courts protect consumers and efforts by business to change product liability laws, and evaluating how socially responsible corporations can proactively respond to consumer needs. We now move on to slide 3. Advocacy for consumer interests. As long as business has existed, consumers have tried to protect their interests when they go to the marketplace to buy goods and services. Consumerism, consumer movement, the organized group activates collective efforts by consumers in many countries to safeguard their own rights. Examples of U.S. advocacy organizations include Consumer Federation of America, National Consumers League, and the American Association of Retired People, affectionately known as AARP. We move on to slide 4. Reasons for consumer movement. Complex products have enormously complicated the choices consumers need to make when they go shopping. Just take a walk down your aisle in your major supermarket. Just go down the cereal aisle and you will see that there's a tremendous amount of variety. And with variety, there's also confusion, and it makes it more difficult to make informed choices. Services as well as products have become more specialized and difficult to judge. When businesses try to sell both products and services through advertising, claims may be inflated or they may appeal to emotions. Technology has permitted businesses to learn more than ever about their customers, potentially violating their privacy. Just look at all the spam you get in your email, and some businesses have ignored product safety and now are being brought to task for those kinds of violations. We now move on to slide number 5. The rights of the consumers. The right to be informed, protection against misleading advertising, labeling. We have labeling on all of our foods. We know exactly how many calories, if it has trans fats, how many grams of fiber, etc. Given the facts to make an informed purchasing decision. The right to safety, protection against the marketing of goods that are hazardous to health or life. The right to choose, assurance of access to a variety of products and services at competitive prices, and the right to be heard, assurance that consumer interests will receive fair consideration in government policy and courts. The right to privacy, assurance that information disclosure is disclosed in commercial transactions is not shared with others, which would cause a violation of privacy. Moving on to slide 6, how government protects consumers. Taken together, the consumer protection laws are safeguards that reflect the goals of government, policymakers, and regulators in the context of the 5 rights of consumers that we mentioned previously. The role of government protecting consumers is extensive in the U.S. as well as many other nations, which have taken the lead from the U.S. as far as the rights of consumers. Goals of consumer laws: to provide consumers with better information when making purchases, to protect consumers against possible hazards, to promote competitive pricing, to promote consumer choice, to protect privacy. We now skip to slide 9. Consumer privacy in the digital age. Today we are bombarded with messages. Open up your smartphone. People like you ordered stuff like this. Go on your Amazon account. You go on YouTube, which this video we posted to. You get suggestions based on your likes, the shows that you watch, and the things, the genres that you watch on YouTube. And as a result, there is a propensity for people to try to hack into your account. The other day, one of my parents was contacted by somebody with, pretending to be a Verizon worker, asking one of my parents to log in and give a credit card. Thank God that was thwarted, and the parent that happened to realize that it was a scam and stopped it. I instructed her to pull out the Ethernet connection and to shut the computer off immediately. I even had suggested that they reformat the hard drive and to make sure no malware was left over on the computer. But we see how ridiculous it is. I myself received a prank, what I call a fake call, a prank call, whatever you want to call it, from somebody pretending to be an IRS with a heavy foreign accent, obviously with heavy background noise in the back, and demanding that I go to CVS and buy all kinds of Apple gift cards and tell them the serial numbers. Obviously, this is fraud. But this is something that occurs because we have so much technology. Not to mention the fact banks are now very cautious. I get alerts all the time from Chase anytime something is purchased from a place that is not not a place that I usually go to. So that's very comforting that banks have now taken a lead in making sure that your money is safe, which is what they should be doing. You work hard for your money, so you deserve for it to be safeguarded. We move on to slide 10, consumer protection in the digital age. Dilemma on how to protect consumer privacy while fostering internet commerce. Proposed solutions: consumer self-help. Internet users should use technologies that enable them to protect their own privacy. Industry self-regulation. Internet-related business advocate being allowed to regulate themselves. Advantages: that they have the best technology to do so. Critics feel industry rules may be too weak. Privacy legislation favor new government regulations protecting consumer privacy online. Just want to go back to the previous slide. I want to focus on the second bullet there. The danger is not only that this information might rarely be used fraudulently, but also that its collection represents an unwarranted incursion to personal privacy. Back in the day, there was a book that everybody read in school called 1984, and it was kind of foreshadowing, or not really foreshadowing, but referring to communism, communist Russia, China, etc. Big Brother was watching. Today, it's a reality, and it's something really frightening that people can get all this information about you. And I'm always very, very careful about the websites I go to. I'm very careful what I post on social media. I want to be as inconspicuous as possible and make yourself the smallest target. That's something you should really, really consider when posting stuff on social media. Let's go to slide 11, to product liability. Now we just went back to 9 for a few seconds. We did 10 already. Now we're going on to 11. Product liability, the legal responsibility of a firm for injuries caused by something it made or sold. Again, back in the day, there was no liability. People lied about the content. If you remember back in your high school days, if you read a book called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, he was a muckraker, an undercover reporter in the early 1900s who went into the Chicago meatpacking industry and covered all kinds of horrible things. Read the book. It's amazing. It's a short book. But there was a quantum change after that book was written. And there was product liability. People were held accountable. Kind of what happened after 9/11, when we had the emergence of the Homeland Security. So product liability, the legal responsibility of a firm for injuries caused by something it made or sold. In U.S. and some other countries, consumers have the right to sue and collect damages if harmed by unsafe products. Consumer advocates and trial attorneys have supported these legal protections. By contrast, some in the business community have argued courts and juries have unfairly favored plaintiffs and have called for reform. Again, it's kind of similar to like reverse discrimination that we spoke about in the previous chapters, but now it's getting out of hand. Everybody is suing. We've become a litigious kind of society where you just sue. Let's see, if we throw enough mud against the wall, it'll stick. And that's not good, because then we stop progress. And that's really wrong. Slide 12, product liability continued. Strict liability doctrine under which the U.S. courts have held that manufacturers are responsible for injuries resulting from the use of their products, whether or not they were negligent or breached a warranty. A publicized case of McDonald's and coffee spill where jury awarded an award of $2.9 million. McDonald's was held liable even though it provided warning and customer actions contributed to her burns, yet she won. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're an adult, you're not a small baby. You have hot coffee and it says the contents are hot. It's not like, you were served hot coffee in a clear plastic cup that usually would have cold soda in it. It was obvious. This is just one of the examples, many examples out there of how large companies, were forced to pay out millions for no reason. Huge settlements like the McDonald's case are the exception. Statistics show plaintiffs win about 34% of the cases filed for an average of $201,000, but still, it's quite scary that somebody could win such a case. We move on to slide 13, product liability. Product liability systems of other nations differ significantly from that of the U.S. In Europe, judges rather than juries hear cases, punitive damages are not allowed, and victims' health expenses are not an issue as they are covered by national health insurance. Historically, product liability cases have been exceedingly rare in China, but that began to change in 2009 in the wake of China's tainted milk scandal, which is something that rocked the world. Slide number 14, product liability reform and alternative dispute resolution. In 2005, Congress passed the Class Action Fairness Act, the first significant product liability reform in many years. The two key elements of this legislation were: most class action lawsuits moved from state to federal courts. Attorneys in some kinds of cases were paid based on how much plaintiffs actually received or how much time the attorney spent on the case. We move on to slide 15. Alternate dispute resolution. One approach to settling disagreements between companies and consumers other than going to court can take the form of mediation, which is a voluntary process to settle disputes using a third-party neutral, but that is not binding. Arbitration, the use of an impartial individual to hear and decide a case outside of the judicial system. Proponents of ADR, alternative dispute resolution, argue that it is a faster and less expensive way to resolve company-consumer disputes and does not tie up the judicial system with minor issues. A controversial aspect of consumer ADR is the use of mandatory arbitration clauses. We move on to slide number 16. Positive business responsive to consumerism. Managing for quality. Quality management refers to all the measures an organization takes to assure quality. Demings and Feigenbaum, we have created a concept called TQM, Total Quality Management. For those who've taken my management class, you know about that. Taking steps at all stages of the production process to ensure consistently high quality has many benefits. Managing for product and service quality is an attempt by business to address its consumers' needs. Finally, complex issue of what to do when business product produces safe, high-quality products, but that is used by others in dangerous ways. An example of this, and this may seem completely ridiculous and out of hand, recently we had the issue with Tide Pods being eaten by people. I mean, who in the world would allow a child to eat a Tide Pod? Which normal person would not watch for that? Tide Pods, I don't understand how a Tide Pod could be misconstrued for food. But again, people do that. People use products unsafely. People could take apart electronic products, and there's warnings that the warranty will be voided, but also there could be electrical shock. So when you bring it on yourself, the courts have to realize that there was negligence on the part of the user, not of the producer. Slide 17, positive business response to consumerism. Voluntary industry codes of conduct. Businesses in some industries have banded together to agree on voluntary codes of conduct, spelling out how they will treat their customers. Consumer Affairs Department, these centralized departments normally handle consumer inquiries and complaints about a company's products and services. Some have consumer hotlines or interactive websites. Product recalls occurs when a company, either voluntarily or under an agreement with a government agency, takes back all items found to be dangerously defective. And you hear this every day with baby cribs, strollers, sometimes toys. Like a couple years ago, there was an issue with toys having lead in its paint, toys from China. Vehicles, I've gotten many recalls on my car for small little things. I don't think I've ever owned a car in my life, a minivan, that didn't have a letter attached to it at some point in my ownership of that car that said, hey, return it to the dealer, X, Y, and Z part needs to be replaced. But I'll tell you something, it's important. Without the consumer movement, we wouldn't have seatbelts in cars. Ralph Nader, back in the 60s, wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed. And without that movement, we wouldn't have seatbelts, we wouldn't have airbags, we wouldn't have side impact airbags, and all this safety spills over, the consumer safety spills over not only in the business arenas, but also in sports. If any of you are major sports fans, NFL fans, the amount of safety that goes in, the changing of the rules in the NFL, making sure that certain hits are not allowed, which cause tremendous concussions, also, in race cars, racing, various harnesses that have to be put in, and safety features and safety apparel that have to be worn. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's lecture. Have a great evening and be well.